The way to be of Gestalt is the establishing, concentrated within self, which waylays the truth of its own way to be in forgottenness. This waylaying, this misrepresentation of itself as something which is additional, is misplaced. In the disposing of everything that is present, by unfolding itself as a fund, by establishing itself within this fund, and by reigning as the fund. In the disposing of everything that is present, things are disposed to us, but this waylaying isn't part of the direct experience of the Gestalt or the placing of technology, right? So even though there's something which is off about technology, about its way of disposing itself to us, and the way it represents itself, this misplacement is itself not part of the direct experience of it. It's something hidden. The Gestalt is there as the danger. But in saying that, does the danger already manifest itself as danger? Okay, so there's some danger in this, but the danger is questioning, does it manifest itself as a danger? No. To be sure, dangers and perils press extremely hard on men, everywhere and at every hour. Right? Everywhere people are faced with some kind of danger, and this presses very hard on them. Right? As the relation between a person and his situation may lead him into boredom or excitement or a feeling like peril, and he views all of these as kind of guides to the understanding of being, which is the ultimate question. And all of these different states and these states of being ultimately lead back to that question. So all of these dangers are passing down everywhere and at every hour, but the danger, namely, of beings endangering itself in the truth of its way to be, remains hidden and misplaced. But this danger, this danger which is peculiar to being itself, where it misrepresents itself, this isn't something which people are experiencing. They're experiencing all these other dangers, but not the danger of being misplaced. And this misplacement is the most dangerous part of the danger. In accordance with this misplacement of the danger by means of the disposing done within Gestalt, it still seems again and again as if technology were an instrument in the hands of men. Okay, so it seems as if technology is in the hands of men and it's kind of an instrument, but this itself is part of the misplacement of the danger. This misplacement isn't something within the subjectivity of the person, but in the very being of the technology itself. But in truth, the way to be of man is now so disposed as to assist the way to be of technology. So we're helping technology misplace itself, right? We're letting it be something kind of outside of the question of being, something which doesn't disclose itself fully to us, and we're happy with that, and we're actually helping it to be itself, be that way. Does this say that man is, for better or for worse, helplessly delivered up to technology? Are we helpless in this? No. It says the exact opposite. Not only this, but essentially more, because it says something else. If Gestalt is an essential mittance of being itself, then we can conjecture that Gestalt changes as one mode of being's way to be among others. So this misplacement can't be called, or although it's a misplacement, this misplacement is also a mode of being, right? And in trying to answer the question of being generally, we can't just sweep it aside or somehow find a way to negate this misplacement, but we must recognize as a mode of being also. For the fateful thing about the mittens is that it sends itself into every sending. To send oneself means to open oneself up in order to fey oneself in the indicated direction, for which another still hidden mittens waits. If Gestel is an essential mittens of being itself. So this is something which is saying is essential to being, right? It's part of the question of being, but it's being insofar as there's some change or misplacement, which happens in the way which it disposes itself to us. Then we can conjecture that just still changes one mode of being's way to be among others. And the fateful thing about this change is that it sends itself into every sending. To send oneself means, so this change opens up itself in order that it may fit together in the indicated direction, in some direction, for which another still hidden mittens waits. So by following this this misplacement, it can bring us to the point at which it fails, or in which it fits together with another movement, another kind of misplacement, which in some sense is waiting for us. And the fatefulness moves in itself from time to time towards an opportune moment. So this misplacement, which is moving towards a different misplacement or movement, a different mittens in which we need to follow, is from time to time it's bringing itself towards, or we're going towards the opportune moment in which this can be realized. And this moment will send us into that other mittens, in which it does not, however, simply become extinct or get lost. The displacement of technology will not be lost in this new realization of being. It won't get lost, it won't be extinct, it will still in some way be there. We are still too inexperienced and too unthinking to think the way to be of the historical form out of mittens and sending and self-sending. We are still too easily inclined, because of habit, to propose the fateful from out of happening and to conceive this as a contemplation of historically identifiable occurrences. We are still too inexperienced and too unthinking to think the way to be of the historical, from out of mittens and sending and self-sending. So we still view this faithfulness as part of a historical occurrence and not as part of the understanding or unfolding of being. From its changes and its sending, its opening up, and its opening up of itself to us, that is. We are still too easily inclined, because of habit, to propose the fateful from out of happening. Okay, so we propose this fateful occurrence from out of the happening of being and conceive this as a completion of historically identifiable occurrences. We put history into the realm of happening instead of thinking of history, according to the origin of its way to be, from out of mittens. History is saying here is not a part of happening of being, and that we think of, but that we think of it that way instead of thinking of history according to the origin of its way to be. History as a movement of being. But mittens is essentially mittens of being, so much so that being itself sends itself, and always is there as mittens and changes accordingly in terms of mittens. If a change in being, i.e. here, in the way to be of Gestel takes place, that in no way says that technology, whose way to be is based upon Gestel, would be eliminated. Technology is saying based on Gestel. Technology, I think here, would be referring to the beings of technology, and Gestel as the being of technology. That is to say, being as something general and something essential, and beings as kind of the things which we are able to observe. And so mittens is essentially mittens of being. The changes in technology are also changes in being generally or essentially. So much so that being itself sends itself and always is there as mittens. So being essentially opens itself up and always is there as mittens and changes accordingly in terms of mittens. So being, the essence of being is changing as and opening up as history moves forwards and as technology changes. So technology here is referring, it should go without saying, not only to stuff like computers and smartphones, but technology generally, which is anything which is fitted to the human hand or which is instrumental in our accomplishing something. If a change in being, i.e. here, in the way to be of Gestel takes place, that in no way says that technology, whose way to be is based upon Gestel, would be eliminated. And so it's not a consequence of the change of being in its essence that technology, its individual instances, would be eliminated, right? The two are connected such that they go together. And just as much as being changes and opens itself in accordance with beings, changes in being does not eliminate the beings which it bases, which it forms the ground for. It is neither struck down nor in any way destroyed. In the way to be of technology, Gestel as the danger within being is being itself. Then technology can never be mastered, either positively or negatively, by means of human activity that is simply dependent upon itself. Alright, so the consequence of this is that technology has its own way of being, and which he has been talking about here. And this way of being is not something which can be mastered just by us thinking of it as purely a consequence of our actions. We can't think of technology purely as instrumental. It needs to have its own being as well. It cannot be mastered by means of a human activity which is simply dependent on itself, on our own being. Technology, whose way to be is being itself, can never be overcome by man. That would mean, after all, that man is master of being. Okay? But granting that being has sent itself into Gestel as a way to be of technology, the way to be of technology cannot be guided into the change of its mittens without the cooperation of man's way to be, because man's way to be belongs to the way to be of being, insofar as the way to be of being needs man's way to be in order to remain preserved as being according to the proper way to be in the midst of the entity, and thus to be there as being. Oof, what a mouthful. Okay. This is to say that being as technology, as Gestalt, being which has sent itself into Gestalt as a way to be of technology, as he puts it, is dependent on the cooperation of man. It does not move by itself. And this can be because of the nature of man's being, which is to allow things to be in their being. Okay? So, a world which just is without man can be said to form a bit of contradiction, because it is sending itself, and man is a receptacle, or must be the receptacle by which that sending is received. And in receiving being and technology, we are in cooperation with it. We are allowing it to be, and preserving it according to the proper way, which is its own way, in the midst of the entity, which is the individual things which we are in communication with. However, technology is not thus overcome by man. On the contrary, the way to be of technology is overcome by getting into its still hidden truth. This overcoming is similar to what happens when in the human realm a pain is gotten over. The overcoming, however, of admittance of being, here and now, the overcoming of the Gestalt, comes to pass each time from out of the arrival of another admittance, which can be neither logically, historically calculated in advance, nor constructed metaphysically, as sequence of a process of history. We never do overcome technology totally, once and for all. However, we can overcome it in the sense of overcoming a temporary difficulty. However, even if we overcome some temporary difficulty in the beings of technology, in, say, trying to get a computer to work, this does not entail that we've overcome a change in the being of technology, that getting a computer to work does not change its fundamental way of being. And the overcoming of a fundamental way of being, and cooperation with it to allow itself to open up more, here and now the overcoming of the Gestalt, comes to pass each time from out of the arrival of another admittance. So it does not totally, this overcoming does not totally depend on just the Gestalt or placing of technology, but it relies on another admittance. That is to say, there is something in addition to the current placing of technology, which may be part of the totality of technology, but has not been placed yet. And from out of this kind of totality, which has not yet been realized, arrives another admittance. And this cannot be predicted logically, historically, nor constructed metaphysically. The former because the historical conditions are contained entirely within the Gestalt. There's nothing in the historical, logical conditions of the present which are outside of the Gestalt. And so another admittance cannot come out of that. Nor can it be constructed metaphysically because we do not have from the start a total conception of being, but only a conception of Gestalt. And as we only have a conception of Gestalt, we can never really escape out of that in the presence except through an unfolding, through the becoming of the things which are outside of Gestalt. And Gestalt itself will lead towards these other things. That is its fundamental movement. A sequence of a process of history. For the historical, or even the happening that is historically advanced, never determines the mittens. Rather, the happening and its allotted proposing of its fund are always already the faithfulness of mittens of being. So historical never determines this movement, rather happening, and the things which are allotted to happening are always already the faithfulness of emittance of being. Happening contains within itself the fate or the movement of change of being. That change, of course, being bringing forth of more being. Man is indeed needed for the overcoming of the way to be of technology. We are needed, but man is needed here in his way to be that corresponds to this overcoming. Accordingly, man's way to be must first open itself to the way to be of technology. And this is, eventually, something entirely other than the procedure of man's consenting to and promoting of technology and its instruments. But in order for man's way to become attentive to the way to be of technology, in order that there be founded an essential relationship between technology and man in respect to their way to be, contemporary man must before all else find his way back into the breadth of the scope of his way to be. So before we go searching into technology, we should look more inwards towards the scope of what our being is, and that will give us the clues which are needed to correspond, needed in this correspondence with technology. We won't find our answers in the being of technology, but in the being of ourselves, and that is significant for technology and its overcoming. This scope of the way to be receives the dimension that phases it solely from out of the relation, by way of which the truth of being itself is well fitted to the way to be of man as the one needed by being. The scope of the way to be receives the dimension that phases it solely from out of the relation, by way of which the truth of being itself is well fitted to the way to be of man as one needed by being. So this understanding of the scope of our being receives its dimensions, or its properties, or the dimension that phases it, that fits it together, solely from out of the relation. So out of a relation with being, and particularly the truth of being, which itself is well fitted to the way to be of man. So being is fitted to man, and man must learn to be fitted to being through a relation, and that gives the scope of our being. It is not that man first of all establishes himself in the scope of his way to be and takes abode within it. On the contrary, man is capable of nothing essential within the mittens that now hold sway. Bearing this in mind, we consider a saying from Meister Eckhart, in that we think it from out of its source. It goes like this: whoever is not from profound source, whatever work he does, it will yield nothing. Until we realize the full scope of our way to be, nothing we do will be of enough significance in being hold any sway whatsoever. It won't yield to anything. We think the profound source of man in that it belongs to the way to be of being, and is needed by it in order to uphold the way to be of being in its truth. This is essentially a restatement of what he was saying before, the relation between man and being, and how man allows being to be in its full truth. Therefore, the first thing that we must do is first of all to ponder the way to be of being as something worthy for thought, and, thinking such, to experience first of all to what extent we are called upon to mark out an initial path for such experience, and to open the way into that which until now has been pathless. Because this is our essence, because this is our, in some way, responsibility, the first thing which we must do is not deny that being is something which can be thought of, but to think of it as something worthy of thought or forethought. And by doing this, we bring it into our sight, into our purview for things which are valuable and which we deal with. We are capable of all of this only if, prior to the question that appears to be the only pressing one, and apparently the closest one at hand, what should we do? We ponder this. How must we think? So before we consider our daily actions, what should we do today or tomorrow, we must ponder how must we think first and foremost, and this thinking as a thinking of being. For thinking is a genuine doing, if doing means to assist the way to be of being. This says to prepare for the way to be of being within the entity, the abode in which being brings itself and its way to be to language. Okay? So we must think of being, and we must ponder the proper way to think of being. And this is our proper, the thing proper to us to do, which is to assist being and to allow being, in the abstract referring to the being of everything, to reside or find a place within the entity, within the things which we see around us. And through the entity, which is the only thing we can really perceive, to bring being into it and into language. Language, of course, corresponding in this case to entities. It is language that first grants the way to go to all who want to think the matter over. So we think through language, and language grants us, it allows us to think things over, to think of the things around us by naming them, by being able to refer to them, and through them to be able to consider being. So we have a coming down of being and a going up towards being on our part. Without language, every doing lacks every dimension within which it could bestir itself and work. Without language, there is no point to doing, which he defined earlier as assisting the way to be of being. So this could be interpreted, for example, language is a communal act. We understand each other through language. If we were to understand being, say, without language, without the ability to communicate it, or to communicate with entities through language, then being would lose all of its dimensions, and we would be something akin to, say, the primitive, who observes being only in a very naive sense. In this sense, language is never primarily expression of thinking, feeling, and willing. Language is the originary dimension within which man's way to be is first capable at all of responding to being and its claim, and of belonging to being and responding. Okay, so it's language which gives dimension to man's way to be, which allows it to exist not only in simplicity but on multiple levels, and to allow us to respond to being, not just be passive to its whims, to be kind of an active agent in its creation, and to respond to being's claim on us, and of belonging to being. This originary responding, really carried out, is thinking. So all thinking is a response to being. Thinkingly, we first learn the dwelling within the realm in which the overcoming of the mittens of being, the overcoming of a gestel, comes to pass. So through thinking, through responding to being, we overcome our current moment of technology, of the positing of technology within the broader framework of being, and the limits on being which that entails. Thinkingly, we overcome that. We are able to move towards a wholer understanding of being, as the question of being is always a question of the whole of being. The way to be of gestel is the danger. As the danger being turns away from its way to be and into the forgottenness of its way to be, and thus turns at the same time against the truth of its way to be. So the way to be of being is both in a kind of fullness and in a kind of forgottenness. Or to put that a different way, its way to be is fully. However, this entails a forgetting on our part of it, perhaps because we aren't able to fully comprehend it, and as such, being unable to do that, we see only the individual things. In the danger, this turning, not yet thought through, holds sway. Therefore, the possibility of a turning hides in the way to be of the danger, in which turning, the forgetfulness of the way to be of being, turns in such a way that with this turning, the truth of the way to be of being genuinely turns into the entity. Okay? So, the possibility, this turning which is referring to, is the kind of turning against the truth of being's way to be, which is entailed in the forgetfulness, which leads us to turn it into the entity, to turn it only into individual instances, and without a view towards the whole, which is the truth of its way to be. And this possibility is hidden in the danger of its way to be. But presumably this turning of the forgetfulness of being to the upholding of the way to be of being comes to pass only if the danger, turning within its hidden source, really comes to light for once as the danger which it is. And only when we recognize the forgetfulness of being and we move away from that towards an upholding or a responsibility on our part to receive being, can it come to pass. Or this can only come to pass if we recognize the danger as a danger. Perhaps we already stand within the already cast shadow of the arrival of this turning. No one knows when and how it will faithfully come to pass, and it is not necessary to know that. A turning of that kind would even be very destructive for man, because it is man's way to be the waiting one, who waits for the way to be of being in that he thinkingly shepherds it. This is one of the major themes in Heidegger's work, where being never arrives in its fullness, but is always arriving only in part. It's always becoming. It could be said for maybe that the only time when being would arrive in its fullness, or perhaps would be in its destruction, in death. But death is an impossibility in a way, because in our relation to it and our waiting for it, the moment when it does come, we are already gone. And so there's this waiting, there's this kind of becoming or unfolding of being, and then ultimately its termination. Only if man as the shepherd of being waits for the truth of being, only then can he await the arrival of the mittens of being without falling into a mere wanting to know. So only if we are willing to wait and to let being unfold as it does, only when we are willing to do this, to await the moment of its fulfillment. Is he being silly here? Only if the man is willing to wait for the truth of being, can he await the arrival of the mittens of being, without falling into a mere wanting to know. So he's making a very fine distinction. He's saying, only if we're willing to wait for the truth of being, which is being in its fullness, can we await the arrival of the mittens of being. So we don't go immediately towards the mittens of being, or its turning. We apprehend that through the lens of our waiting for the wholeness of being. Right? So we never await some kind of change in being, we only ever await the whole of being. But how is it in that realm where the danger comes to be as danger, and thus is the danger, unconcealed for the first time? In order to hear the answer to this question, we pay heed to the hint reserved in the saying of Hölderlin. In the latter wording of the hymn Patmos, the poet says at the beginning, "But where the danger is, there also thrives the freeing." If we now think this danger still more essentially than the poet sang it, if we think it out to its extreme, then it says, "Where the danger is as danger, there the freeing already thrives." The freeing does not show up alongside. It does not stand next to the danger. The danger is itself the freeing when it is as danger. The danger is the freeing insofar as it, from out of its way to be that turns in a concealed way, brings the freeing. What does to free mean? It beseeks to loose, to make free, to handle carefully, to shelter, to take into one's keeping, to preserve. Lessing still uses the word reckon emphatically, in the sense of vindication, to put back into the right, into the essential, to preserve therein. The genuine freeing is the preserving, the upholding. Again, he talks about the fact that freeing is an essential part of being, and as an essential part of being, it cannot be mitigated. The danger, which is a danger of being, say, unfulfilled or not as wholly into being as we possibly can be, this danger which implies a limitation or privation of being, at the same time, when it is recognized as such, even though it by itself is such a thing, can bring about a freeing. But where is the danger? What is its locus? Insofar as the danger is being itself, it is nowhere and everywhere. It does not have a place as something other than itself. It is a place for all presencing, itself without a place. The danger is the epoch of being that is there as a gestalt. So now he's searching for the precise location of this danger. All right, does it exist in technology? Does it exist in war? But no, danger is being itself. And as such, it is everywhere, can be recognized in all being, but it has it by itself no place. It is as it is, and is a place for presencing. So the things which are present to us are entities first and foremost. And kind of behind that, or through that presence, an entity is present to us, and being is present as the place for the, how do I say this? This is very, well, I suppose the best way to put it is just as he put it. It is a place for presencing, itself without a place. The danger is the epoch of being that is there as the gestalt. Epoch of being. I suppose he's bringing now into this some sense of time, which I'm not sure like his exact thoughts on time, but a specific time or epoch of being must, it seems, entail a gestalt or a placing of being. So gestalt is placed within time. If we were talking of eternity, there would be no gestalt, there would only be being. If the danger is as danger, then its way to be really comes to pass. But the danger is the waylaying, by way of which being itself confuses the upholding of being with forgottenness in the manner of gestalt. So this is the fundamental contradiction. The danger misrepresents itself. It brings itself away from its way to be, but only when it is as it is, when danger is as danger, can being uphold itself. Being itself confuses the upholding of being with forgottenness. And this is in the manner of gestalt, which is one epoch of being, or the epoch of being there as the gestalt. This is what there is in the waylaying. Being displaces its truth into forgottenness, so that being withholds its way to be. Consequently, when the danger is as danger, then the waylaying really comes to be, by way of which being itself waylays its truth in forgottenness. When this waylaying in forgottenness really comes to be, then the forgottenness as such enters in. Thus, torn away from the falling away by means of the entering, it is no longer forgottenness. So we have this contradiction, and is trying to reconcile it. When this waylaying in forgottenness, which is a falling away, comes to be, it comes to us, it enters in. It enters into, say, the picture of being, right? Something which is a going away becomes part of being, and as such is no longer forgetfulness, forgottenness. With such a coming in, the forgottenness of the upholding of being is no longer the forgottenness of being. Rather, turning in, it turns into the upholding of being, and so this is how it's reconciled. The forgottenness itself, the waylaying, must be brought into being and thus uphold it. When the danger is as danger, there comes to pass, with the turning of forgottenness, the upholding of being, there comes to pass world. That world comes to be as world, that thing is as thing. This is the arrival from afar of the way to be of being. We must not deceive ourselves as to the nature of our forgottenness. Somebody, for example, who forgets a lot of things, yet doesn't recognize that they forget things, will never be able to move towards or include in his picture of the world the things which he has forgotten. However, if he can recognize the fact that he forgets, even if it continues to be a forgetting, it becomes part of, say, his picture of himself, and as such upholds his way to be. Talking, of course, for an individual person, say as an example. The self-withholding of the truth of being, waylaying itself in forgottenness, hides a yet ungranted favor, that this self-waylaying will turn, that in such a turning the forgottenness will take a turn, and turn into the upholding of the way to be of being, instead of letting this way to be slide into misplacement. A favor is there and dwells within the way to be of the danger, the favor of the turning of being's forgottenness into being's truth. Within the way to be of the danger, where danger is as danger, there is the turning into upholding, there is the upholding itself, there is the freeing of being. When the turning comes to pass in the danger, this can only happen abruptly, for being has, besides itself, nothing comparable to it. It is not brought about by something else, nor does it bring anything about. Being does not pass away, and is never in a cause-effect relation. There is nothing causative that as being precedes the way in which it is. There is nothing causative that as being precedes the way in which it, being itself, sends itself, nor is there any effect that as being follows. Being comes to pass into its epoch directly from out of its own way to be of hiddenness. Therefore we must heed. The turning of the danger comes to pass abruptly. So there is no cause-effect relationship. There is nothing outside of being which allows this to come to be. It happens abruptly, kind of, as you would say, a switching of terrain, misplacement, from out of the hidden aspect of being into the light. The clearing of being's way to be opens up abruptly in the turning. The abrupt opening up is a flashing. It brings itself into the ownmost light, which has brought along with it and within it. When the truth of being flashes in the turning of the danger, the way to be of being opens up. Then the truth of being's way to be comes in. Whither does the entering come to pass? To nowhere else than into being itself, which up until now is there from out of the forgottenness of its truth. But this being itself is there as a way to be of technology. The way to be of technology is gestel, the entering as the event of the turning of forgottenness, comes into that which is the epoch of being now. That which authentically is in no way this or that entity. What authenticity is, i.e. really dwells in, the eyes and is there. Really dwells in the I, the is and is there, is simply being. Only being is. Only within being and as being does that which the is names come to be. That which is being in its way to be. He has brought back the topic to technology, which is Gestalt, which is the placing positing of being, which happens within an epoch. And he says that the entering, as the event of the turning of goneness, comes into that which is the epoch of being now. So it's kind of creating like a whole, somewhat of a hierarchy here, and is relating all of the terms which is used so far. Flashing is, according to the word and the matter to be thought, a breaking through. Within the flash and as a flash, the way to be comes into its own lighting up. All through the element of its lighting up, the flash hides what has been lit up back into the flashing. But the flashing at the same time preserves, within the lighting up, the hidden veil of its own source as that which is not lit up. The coming in of the flash of the truth of being is insight. We thought the truth of being in the worlding of the world as a mirroring play of the foursome of heaven and earth, mortals and God. When forgottenness turns, when world enters the upholding of the way to be of being, then the flashing in of world comes to pass into the disregard for the thing. This comes to pass in the manner of the dominion of Gestalt. The flashing in of world into Gestalt is a flashing of the truth of being into being without truth. Flashing in is erringness in being itself. Erringness is befitting bringing before the eyes. Okay. We have a few more themes now. It's talking about how this comes to be in the previous paragraph in this. How this comes to be to us. There is a causally, abruptly, as a flashing, according to the word and the matter to be thought. That is according to language, which is our access to entities and to being, and the matter to be thought. So thinking is always, in this case, related to being, and the matter to be thought is that part of being which has as yet not been thought. But the flashing at the same time preserves within the lighting up the hidden veil of its own source as that which is not lit up. So even though there's something which flashes into consciousness or into being suddenly, out of the hidden veil, the veil itself, or the origin of this, is not lit up. And this coming in of the flash of the truth of being is insight. We thought the truth of being in the worlding of world as a mirroring play of the foursome of heaven and earth, mortals and gods. That's very cryptic. I have no commentary for that. But one thing which Heidegger does do a lot is he uses poetry. For example, he used Hölderlin earlier, which is not actually a philosopher, that was a poet. And so this is probably related to that. He talks about how heaven and earth form a duality from which us on earth find our place according to the perspective of heaven and a similar thing can be said of mortals and gods. When forgottenness turns, when world enters is the upholding of the way to be of being, then the flashing in of world comes to pass into the disregard for the thing. It's worth talking about his use of the term world here, which I believe refers to only the entirety of the things of the world and that is the existence of things and nothing of the essence. So when world enters as the upholding of the way to be of being, that is, when we mistake it, when we mistake world as upholding the way to be of being, then the flashing in of world comes to pass into the disregard for the thing. I can't make out whether he's talking here of disregarding things or existences in exchange for only an understanding of being and its way to be, or whether it's talking about the reverse. Whether it's talking about disregarding the way to be of being in exchange for the existence of the things of the world. But if we look at the next sentence, this comes to pass in the manner of the dominion of Gestalt, which is a more straightforward sentence, and which means, okay, the dominion of Gestalt, Gestalt being technology, being the placing, positing of being within the world. The flashing in of world into Gestalt is the flashing of the truth of being into being without truth. That is to say, Gestalt is with being without truth. So Gestalt as technology and as a placing of being exist as the sphere of human human understanding of being, right? And so we have Gestalt, which is the sphere of humanity, and we have world, which is more general and includes aspects of being which aren't confined just to the world of the human. So, for example, if Gestalt is all of the things of technology like skyscrapers, then the world which flashes in, which comes in abruptly into this limited and delimited space, would come in the form of, say, a cyclone. And this cyclone is, say, the truth of being, and it comes into being without truth. It comes into our world which has already shirked off the truth of the way to be of being. Flashing in is erectness in being itself. Erectness is the befitting bringing before the eyes. And so that is brought before our eyes. Insight into that which is. This title now names the event of the turning in being, the turning of the withholding of its way to be into the coming to pass of its upholding. Insight into that which is erectness itself, by way of which the truth of being comports itself to and stands to being that is without truth. Insight into that which is, this names the constellation within the way to be of being. This constellation is the dimension in which being is there as the danger. At first, and almost until the end, it seemed as if insight into that which is meant only a look that we men, from out of ourselves, cast into that which is. So he's talking here kind of historically about insight, and how this used to mean looking at men as men from out of ourselves and kind of casting look, as it were, from kind of a universal or systematic perspective. One usually takes that which is as the entity, for it is from the entity that the is spoken out. But now everything is turned, okay? So from looking at just the objects of the world to now is trying to revive an understanding of being as being. Insight does not name our looking into the entity. Insight as flashing in is the erectness of the constellation of the turning within the way to be of being itself, and that in the epoch of Gestalt. That which is in no way the entity. For the it is and the is are imparted to the entity only insofar as the entity is claimed with regard to its being. Being is spoken out in the is. That which is, in the sense of making up the being of the entity, is being. The disposing in the Gestalt places itself before the thing and lets it, as thing, be unpreserved. Lets it be disregarded as thing. This Gestalt displaces the nearest of world that nears in the thing. Gestalt further displaces its own displacing, just as the forgetting of something forgets itself, and pulls away into the suction of forgetfulness. So, all of these things, the full understanding of being, which is so near to us, and which is, the world as a whole, is being pushed away, is being displaced by our burgeoning human society and our new technologies. And it's being pushed so far that, and being forgotten in such a way that it seems as if it never existed in the first place. Not only does the event of forgottenness let slip into hiddenness, but the slipping away itself slips away along with it, into the hiddenness that itself further falls away in this falling. And yet, in every displacing of Gestalt, the clearing and merging of world opens up, the truth of being flashes. No matter how much we try and displace being, or clearing, the clearing and merging of the world opens up. So the world opens up anyway, and the truth of being flashes in. Namely then, when Gestalt emerges in its way to be as danger, i.e. as the freeing, within Gestalt, still as an essential mittance of being, a light from the flashing of being is there. Gestalt is, though veiled, still a flash and not blind, mittance in the sense of a completely covered over fate. Though veiled, it is not blind. Insight into that which is, such is called the flashing of the truth of being into the being without truth. When insight comes to pass, then men are the ones touched in their way to be by the flashing of being. Men are the ones lit up in the insight. Only when men's way to be within the erectness of insight, as the one lit up by this insight, relinquishes the human obstinacy, and casts himself in the direction of the insight and away from himself. Only then does man respond in his way to be to the claim of the insight. Responding thus, man is fitted so that he, in the preserved element of world, anticipates, as the immortal one, the godly. It is not the other way around. For if God is, he is also an entity, and as entity stands in being, and its way to be which comes to pass from out of the worlding of world. Only when insight comes to pass does the way to be of technology as Gestalt open up. Only then do we recognize how the truth of being as world remains withheld in the disposing of the fund. Only then do we note that every mere willing and doing in the manner of the disposing persists in disregarding. For in that way, every mere ordering of the universally historically proposed world remains also without truth and without foundation. Every mere pursuit of the future, in order to calculate its picture in the way that one extends a half-thought present into the veiled future, itself still moves about in the attitude of technological, calculative proposing. All attempts to account for the existing, real, morphologically or psychologically, in terms of decay and loss, of fate and catastrophe, and of downfall, are simply a technological comportment. It operates with the apparatus of enumeration of symptoms, whose fund can be infinitely increased and constantly varied anew. These analyses of a situation do not notice that they work merely in the sense of, and according to the manner of technological dismembering, and thus that they furnish the technological consciousness with the historical, technological positing of the happening appropriate to it. But no historical proposing of history as happening gets to the appropriate relationship to mittens, and in the end does not get to the essential source of mittens, in erectness of the truth of being. Everything that is merely technological never attains to the way to be of technology. It is not even capable of recognizing the vestibule to that way to be. Therefore, in trying to say that insight into that which is, we are not describing the situation of the age. The constellation of being speaks to us. But we, for whom hearing and seeing vanish through the radio and film, under the dominion of technology, still do not hear. The constellation of being is the withholding of world as the disregarding of the thing. Withholding is not nothing. It is the deepest mystery of being within the dominion of Gestel. Whether God lives or remains dead is not decided by the religiosity of man, and even less by theological aspirations of philosophy and natural science. Whether God is God comes to pass from out of the constellation of being and within it. So long as we do not thinkingly experience what is, we can never belong to what will be. Does insight into that which is come to pass? Are we, as having been lit up, being so taken into the flash of the way to be of being, that we no longer escape it? Do we thereby attain to the way to be of the nearest which approaches world by taking thing as thing? Do we dwell at home in the nearness, so that we belong originally to the foursome of heaven and earth, mortals and gods? Does insight into that which is come to pass? Do we respond to the insight through a flashing that flashes into the way to be of technology and preserves being itself within it? Do we see the flashing of being in the way to be of technology, the flashing that comes from out of the stillness, as the stillness itself? The stillness stills. What does it still? It stills being into the way to be of world. The world, worlding, to be the nearest of everything near that nears, in that it brings the truth of being near to man's way to be, and thus appropriates man unto erectness.